Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm Brigid Burke and it is now I have to remember what day it is. It's the 17th of July. So we are literally 2 weeks left of the month from today. 2 weeks from now will be the 31st. So we will be at this point of, we're already past the halfway point of the year. Good morning, Joanne. We've passed this halfway point of the year. And we've passed, now we're halfway through July, we're almost into Leo season, we're getting out of Cancer season, so it's really, I don't know, it's just amazing to me how time is flying, and I keep thinking about all the stuff, like when you do your annual readings at the beginning of the year. Good morning, Sam. I do my readings at the beginning of the year, and I'm seeing like, okay, all the stuff that's going to happen before the end of the year, and I'm clicking back, and I'm like, have we gotten there yet? I mean, have we gotten to all this stuff? Because it seems like there's going to be an awful lot that's going to be jam-packed, particularly into autumn. Autumn, for me, for some reason, seems like it's going to be a very, very busy and change-oriented time. But I suppose we're going through a lot of change right now. This is an interesting mug. I have to just quickly share the story of this. When I left my last job, the guy who was second in charge, like I was in charge of the department, and the assistant, I guess you could say. He was electronic resources librarian, but he was the second in charge of that whole department. And everybody, when I left, when I retired, basically, they all gave me gifts. And he actually is he does ceramics. He's a potter. I think he's on here as Gray Squirrel Ceramic. I think because he had this thing about squirrels. So he had made me a whole bunch of mugs with the Katonia logo, which is my podcast, that another friend of mine designed the logo, and he tried to take the logo, and he's like, I don't know if I did that great of a job, but it was nice. So, good morning, Melissa. So anyway, I have these mugs, but I don't necessarily get to pull them out that often. There's some that are kind of more in a pink color as well. But, so anyway, I have my Katonia mug this morning that was artisan made, I guess you could say, by my friend. So, just to have a little switch up from the autumn themed mugs, but although you could argue that with the crow on it is kind of an autumn themed mug. This should be one of the last muggy days that we have. It looks like it does look kind of it's maybe stormy out there, and but they're not really talking about rain till tonight. So mine's Alice in Wonderland. Oh, your mug this morning. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, we're all kind of on this. It's really funny you say Alice in Wonderland, because I'm actually editing a book for somebody, which I'm kind of calling a 21st century Alice in Wonderland. She was saying Alice in Wonderland meets David and Goliath. It's rather interesting. You have storms all day. Yeah, you're right, because yours are bats. Okay, so we've got bats, we've got crows, and we've got Alice in Wonderland. Actually, Joanna Madlock, too, who's a big fan of this, she's been on Katonia podcast a few times, and I actually need to reach out to her again. I haven't talked to her in a while, but she's also a huge fan of Alice in Wonderland. In fact, I think she named her daughter Alice after Alice, so it's kind of interesting. So anyway, so that's all the Katonia stuff. I hope everybody's having a good morning. I woke up at 3, and then I kind of went back to bed sort of at 4:30 for like an hour, and then I was like, oh, I better get up. I have a live stream to do. So here I am. And as usual, I have my morning routine. I used the last page of my dream journal today, so my dream journal is now full. And speaking of dreams, I did actually just post on my website, there is going to be a dream workshop on the first weekend I want to say it's August 3rd. And it's going to be from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern time. It's a $20 kind of really donation for the class is what that is. And it is something I'm inviting people who took my dream class at the end of June to attend. However, I will open it up also to other people who just, have dreams they want to analyze and would like to workshop it in a group. At least if I have even some of the people who were in the original dream class that I did, there should be some context for helping to interpret. I have worksheets and things. I'm not going to go through all the material, as I said yesterday, of the previous class. I'm not going to reteach that class. But anybody who joins, we can kind of sort of catch them up on the amplification method of dream analysis, which is what I use. And so anybody who maybe has some weird dreams lately that they're having trouble interpreting, I'm going to have this little workshop And the group that we had last time was really nice. Everybody was like really, really good, really supportive, had a lot of good ideas for people and so forth in talking about dreams. And some people had everybody has some very different perspectives. And that's really the whole point of amplification, is the idea that you are looking at things from as many directions as possible. Interesting example from last night. I had a weird dream last night. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, it was about some friends of mine who I'd met in the early 2000s. And who I used to go to gigs with. I used to go to see the Psychedelic Furs. I used to go to see, we went to see Echo and the Bunnymen a lot. Who was the other one? Oh, and John Fox. John Fox came up as well, which was later. I didn't really go then. Good morning, Terry. So I didn't, so I had, the dream I had was kind of about those two, mainly the people, not so much about okay, we had the poor connection thing, so apologies for that. So, Violent Femmes. Oh yeah, yes, absolutely. I had, but John Fox, John Fox, I don't really talk about this very much, but I went on tour with him a lot, not as an artist, but I was just there a lot of the time from about 2009 to 2012. Beginning of 2013, I think that's when we had I guess we'll call it a falling out. But after that, I used to go to the gigs all the time. I knew him, I knew his son, it was, it was interesting. But I have a lot of my friends in England, actually, I know from doing the Fox gigs. And, then Psychedelic Furs, they used to call themselves the East Coast group. And there's a few people from that group left who I'm still in contact with. Some of them don't live that far from here. So anyway, the dream kind of centered around those people. But I remember it was also partially in the library that I used to go to when I grew up in. And that library comes up all the time in my dreams. It's really strange. I haven't figured out the full range of symbolism of that. But I remember at one point it was something where somebody had speakers that they were hooking up to something. Or they were some kind of wireless speakers. And they were referred to as Avram. And I'm like, the first thing I think of when I wake up when I hear the word Avram is Henrietta Avram, who is the person who actually invented machine-readable cataloging, which is the thing I was an expert in for 27 years. So, weird. I still haven't quite sat down to work that one out. But point being is just that dream symbolism is wide and varied, and that sometimes, if I was to say that in a group, most people will be like, okay, I don't know what that is. Or they might associate it with another word or something else. And to me, I associate it with the thing I did with my career. So there's a personal level of meaning, and then there might be a more collective level of meaning. Or one might point to the other, depending on how the unconscious communicates with you, how your soul communicates with you, really, is kind of how I would look at that, how those communications end up coming through. But speaking of communications, the thing I was going to mention today, and the thing I was going to talk about, the card that came up for me today, because I have you can't really see my my big shelf tarot decks and oracle decks over here, but I have a ton. And so usually I have 2 or 3 at least out in the morning. Sometimes runes. I have Norse runes today. I have a couple different things that I play around with along with Cartouche. And so one of the cards that kept coming up for me this morning was the Ace of Swords. So that was going to be my little topic for today, was to talk a bit about Ace of Swords energy, because what was coming up in the context of when it comes to transitions, we always talk a lot about how we are, I always talk to people about being in transition, being in the gap, and that oftentimes we have to sacrifice something, or you need to think differently about something. So inevitably the question is about when you're looking forward into a new space, is how does one think differently? If you're going to be thinking about something and you have to take a new approach, then how does that work? Because, if you don't have a starting point, sometimes it's very hard to say what you are. It's hard to say whether are you really thinking about this differently. So if you have a problem that you need to solve, what are the ways in which we get out of the routine space that we're in, out of the space that we're comfortable with, to get into a space where we start to think about something differently? Because the Ace of Swords does have to do with new thinking. It has to do with inspiration. Now, when I first learned tarot back in the late 80s, The first book I had studied from, which I think was written by, what's her name, Sasha Fenton? I think that was the name of the author. But she had talked about the Ace of Swords as saying a new beginning, and I remember her saying distinctly, whatever's coming is coming in with a bang. Like it's something that's coming in hot, coming in fast. And so with that air energy, there's a level of unexpectedness. So if we think about swords in terms of mental energy, but if we look at, say, the court cards, for example, if you start from the Page of Swords is kind of one of those cards that is very, it usually has to do with information that either somebody's like something you don't know, like that they're like, there's a piece of information that you need to get that you don't know, or there's a sense that somebody's being indirect or someone's being sneaky. It has almost like a Seven of Swords vibe to it as well, because there's this idea of there's some piece of information you don't have. Sometimes the Page of Swords is associated with gossip or with scandal. Some people read that as the reversal. Page of Swords, in theory, when you think about the relationship of the pages and the aces, the pages should be kind of similar in terms of the message that they give. Because Page of Swords is about messages specifically, and aces are specifically about new beginnings. But they're also messengers. So the idea is, you've got this youthful energy of the page. But I have another friend who reads, and I know he's somebody who always feels that, whenever he reads and he sees the Page of Swords, he's just like, oh my God. He's like, am I the only person who feels like when I see the Page of Swords, like that's a bad omen, like something's going to happen? Because I don't know, for him, when he associates with it, he's just like, oh, somebody you got to watch out for. Like that's, even though the Page of Swords in theory can represent things like signing contracts, it can just represent being diplomatic. Again, very similar to the Seven of Swords. There's an energy of not approaching something directly, which I think we were also talking about maybe yesterday, maybe the day before. I have no idea. Days run together. But so there's this idea of this kind of information. And when we think about that, though, when you think about the idea of energy coming in through a sneaky way, let's call it, or sometimes it comes up if somebody is doing something behind the scenes. They're not necessarily doing something bad, okay? But there's the idea that somebody may be secretly observing what you do or something like that, and not actually coming out. And it's not really, they're not direct and forthcoming. Ace of Swords, interestingly, has a very direct and forthcoming kind of an energy to it. So it's interesting that they're not quite the same in that way. But in the interest of talking about new thinking, sometimes that means that we have to go about something in an indirect way. So how do we start to think about things differently? Well, one way you can do it is literally, like the Hanged Man, turn it upside down on its head. Okay, you can literally just turn a situation upside down and then say, okay, if I look at this either from somebody else's perspective, good morning, Sudha, either you're looking at something from somebody else's perspective, or you are just taking like an opposite or contrary viewpoint. It makes me think of Robert Anton Wilson. He would talk about these reality tunnels, and he would say in order to get out of your reality tunnel, one of the things, which is basically the tunnel vision that you have based on your perspective. And so when you have this kind of tunnel vision, the idea is, okay, so he would say, this was back in the 60s, he would say like, okay, well, if you, say, have a very conservative mindset, you might want to read some more liberal publications or vice versa, like just as a simple example. I don't quite know how that would work today because some things are just so very extreme, and some things it's just, there's some ideas that we just don't want to entertain at all, because they, for example, ideas that have to do with genocide or hate or, blaming an entire race or seeing an entire race as inferior. I mean, yes, those ideas are out there. Those are not ones that we should be, entertaining as, serious thing. Well, serious in the sense that there are people who actually espouse those kind of ideas. But that's not like something that we should be like, well, let's consider this when we're making public policy. Yeah, consider it in the sense that you don't want anything to do with it. I mean, it is not a socially friendly policy. So obviously, like I said, there are some points of view that it's just like, well, no, we don't want to take those points of view. Karl Popper had said it, you can't, the paradox of tolerance is that you can't tolerate intolerance. I guess, like a 180. Yeah, Joanne, yes. Yeah, right. Like kind of flipping something around and looking at it from the other side. So, you know, and that's not always an easy thing to do, because you may take a point of view, like if you've taken the point of view that if you're very secure in something and say, well, whatever I do, I have to hang on to this job, or I have to make this amount of money, I have to do this, I have to do that. So then you have to say to yourself, okay, well, without catastrophizing, what would happen if I don't do these things? What if I don't have that job? What if I don't have this kind of money? What if I don't have that? Like, what's going to happen? And rather than, so first you might look at all the catastrophic things, but say, well, let's take the point of view that that's a good thing. Okay, so what are all the good, what are all the things about it that might be beneficial here? You know, how might that be an opportunity? Or it might not be an either or proposition. You might start with a 180. And again, I don't want to get all Hegelian here, but sometimes there is a middle way. Okay, sometimes there's a synthesis between the two. But oftentimes, because we think in binaries, we tend to think that there's only two choices. That when we are making decisions and we're making choices, another aspect of sword energy, like when you look at the kings, and so King of Swords, for instance, is about decision making. You have, when you're thinking about making decisions, we tend to think of, well, I can do X or I can do Y, and there are no other choices. I can either do this with it this way or not this way. And we tend to also see those in terms of very strict categories. This is the good way to do it. This is the bad way to do it, or the right way and the wrong way, right? You'll see that the wrong way. These are the wrong ways. Here's the right way. The thing is, the right way in a particular situation isn't always obvious, and it's not always just the thing that goes along with conventional wisdom. And the solution that might be right for you may not be right for somebody else. Okay, so for example, going back to the job thing, me making the decision that, okay, I'm gonna leave my job and I'm gonna find this third way to do things. I mean, yes, I've got a business and all that, but I'm going to try to find this other way to do things. And then again, the more people you talk to, which is why you often, when you're trying to move in a new space, there's this idea of you want to expand and not contract. Obviously, there's a certain amount of time where we want to think deeply, we want to connect with our inner voice, we want to say, okay, what's that telling us? What's our intuition guiding us towards? And if your intuition is different from what your mind is saying, then you want to make sure that your intuition is being heard, because oftentimes the mind will just stick you in, oh yes, but yeah, I would love to do this thing, but I can't, because if I do this thing, then these three things are going to happen if I don't do this, and then that'll be a problem, and then I'll be sunk. Like, we kind of tend to think that there's only even if we don't like something that's going on, okay, even if we say, oh, I really hate this job, I really hate this relationship, I really hate this, I really hate that, but there's always a reason, like, oh, well, but I can't really do anything about it right now, I just have to suck it up and stay where I'm at, and even if that happens, even if that's something that we feel is true for a period of time, the question is, how do you think beyond it? Let's take a relationship example rather than a job example. So if I go back to when I was married, when I probably about, when did I get married? 94. So I want to say it was around 96, 97. There was some real bad stuff that happened. And I'm not even going to discuss what it was. It was just not good. And when I went to work, because I worked for a book distributor then, I would talk to my coworkers, and some of them were people who I was friendly enough that I would talk about what was going on, and they look at me, they're like, why are you still, leave now, just get out. This is a night, just get out. Okay. And by the way, it was not physical abuse, just to be clear. We stay because it's comfortable, even if it's unhealthy. It's like what we know is even if it's bad. Right. Well, it's the devil you know thing. Right. It's the devil you know. Interestingly, for me, it was because we had cats, and I couldn't bear with the idea of parting with any of my cats, because I knew he was going to want to take some of them if we split up. I also felt like financially I wasn't going to be able to make it. Like, I had all kinds of reasons why this was not the thing to do. And I think also because I had it in my head that because I had made the commitment that I couldn't just walk away from it. because that is kind of my thing. And generally speaking, yeah, I mean, sometimes people, I don't know that it's true anymore, but I think a lot of people, you're the same. Yeah, you walk into a marriage and a lot of people, because there's still a lot of people who have the idea. Certainly I was raised, like I said, I had that more 70s mentality, because I was a child in the 70s and then in the early 80s. And so it was more this mentality of, well, yes, of course, one day you're going to get married and have a family. Like, that's just a foregone conclusion. This is what women do, right? And we don't have that idea anymore. We don't see that. So there's an example of, no, yeah, that's not your destiny. You're not necessarily going to have a child. You're not necessarily going to have a spouse. You're not necessarily, and I meant the collective we, not us here. Oh yeah, sure, absolutely. But it's, yeah, so there was a point at which I had said, and there was also this attitude, that divorce was somehow some kind of a failure, you know? And of course it's not. I mean, the divorce rate's pretty darn high. I think it's still at 50%, 50 to 51. I don't know what the current number is. But, you know, if somebody's not in a good relationship, most people, the conventional wisdom now is just get out. Okay? If it's not a good situation, get out. And the red flags are not always the obvious ones. We think of physical abuse as being the red flag, but there are other ones too. There's other kinds of emotional abuse. There's gaslighting, there's narcissism, there's all kinds of things that can go on. And sometimes there's even situations that are more complex than that. And again, because you have an idea, like I had mentioned about my first spouse, it was like we were both, like I said, both philosophy and religion majors. We were both, you know, they looked at us, basically we were like the department power couple. Like, they were just like, oh, you guys totally belong together. And you kind of have that in your mind. Well, obviously, because we also have this idea in the mind that there's one right person for us, right? There's just that one person. And if that option doesn't work out, I don't have any options, right? Well, you know, over time, it was like, I think when I eventually decided to leave, it was a couple more years that I actually stayed in that marriage. And that was after the thesis incident that I talked about yesterday. That almost ended it, but then we kind of hung in. But the following year, I literally woke up one morning. And speaking of the inner voice, literally I was sitting on my porch having my coffee. And the phrase came, it's time to leave. Time to leave. Just came into my head. Time to leave. And again, the same thoughts came up. Well, how am I going to do that? How am I going to afford it? So finally I was like, wait a minute. Let me just stop. Let's stop that train of thought. Because what are my reasons for not leaving, right? What are my reasons for not leaving? Because I can't say I was comfortable. I was not happy. And I felt very confined. So I was like, all right, well, what are my things? Okay, so finances. I'm worried about finances. So let's sit down and look at finances. How much money do I make without him? Okay? What would my budget be, and what can I afford if I needed to get a place of my own and pay for it strictly on my salary? And then what else could I do? At that time, I was working a job where I could work overtime and stuff. Okay, so maybe I can do that. And yes, I won't have a whole lot for right now, but I can build up from there, you know, just because, and that's the other thing too. A lot of times we look at the situation that we're in and we say, well, I'm going to look at it like, okay, I have this job now, I make this much money. That's the way it's going to be forever. Well, that's not the way it's going to be forever. I realize that raises are not often forthcoming, but people change jobs. I mean, I changed jobs. After that time, let's see, I think I was working for that same library I was telling you about. And then eventually I moved up the ladder there, and then I went over to the university, and I was there for 15 years. You know, again, starting as an archivist and then moving my way up to department head. But obviously my salary increased, things changed. Because things change. Things don't stay the same. That's the thing too. A lot of times we look at our current situation and say, oh, well, it's always going to be this. Well, of course it's not. Things change all the time. And they can change either way for us. But that's the challenge. Like, how do you meet whatever the situation is at the moment? And so that's what I had done. I was just like, yeah, you know what? I could make this work. And for the cats, I was like, well, you know, I hate it, but, you know, it wasn't like I knew he wasn't going to abuse them or anything. He would have taken care of them. I wasn't worried about that. But I was just like, well, then you just got to suck up the fact that you might not have it. Well, as it turns out, I ended up with all 4 cats. At that time we had 4. And I was trying to move into an apartment and tell my landlord I only have 1, but I had 4. Unfortunately, I was allowed to have but they never, like, they didn't destroy anything or anything. It was fine. And when I left, I got my security deposit back. It was totally fine. But it was, it was, but those were the main things that were really keeping me there, which is kind of weird when you think about it. But for me, my cats were like my children. And if you have pets, you understand what this is like. So I was like, I don't want to give them up. But again, that said, he wasn't like he was the type of guy who was going to abuse animals or neglect them. So I wasn't, it really wasn't a rational fear in the sense of, oh, they're not going to be taken care of. So it was, and then it was just kind of like, okay, so now I've just got to gear up for the conversation, and we won't get into that. It was just kind of like, what is it that's keeping you in place? So one of the things I tend to do with clients is to say, all right, well, and actually Rouhani has been really helpful with some people, because sometimes there's people like, yeah, I don't know, I just feel like I'm blocked, but I don't really know why. There's that kind of like, I don't know, I just kind of have this general, and it's hard to know, because again, you're trying to distinguish between what's intuition and what's just your script kicking in again saying, oh yeah, no, but you can't do that. Like, oh, you're going to step outside the script? Oh, now it's time for the solar plexus to tighten up and get really nervous, right? So how do we work around that? So sometimes it does mean walking away from something that was fine, like that's our 8 of Cups energy, right? Sometimes the path forward is to just walk away. Sometimes a lot of times we take time out to, we want again, like I've said, we want to plan every aspect of, well, I know things need to be different, but I need to plan every step of it so that I'm planned out for the next 5 years and whatever. The thing is, plans don't usually work. If it's a situation where you feel like, red flags are increasing, or there's just a situation that just feels intolerable, then it's probably not going to become more tolerable. And the fact that you may later on say, oh, well, I don't feel as bad about it now. It could just be that, in the same way that you get a pain tolerance, after a while you don't feel that, you don't, if you're somebody who's very sensitive, you can learn to build like a huge wall up so that you just don't allow those emotions to touch you. And that's not really a healthy state to be in either, because that actually has effects not only on the mind but on the body in ways that maybe that are more subtle. They might not be something that are obvious or not something that you see right away until you have that moment where you have it's the 10 of Wands energy. To have that's another aspect of it. It's not just, oh, I took on a whole bunch of stuff. It's that now I'm going to have that explosion of everything. Haha, yep, love my walls. Yeah, and you know what? And I've had like Iron Fortress for years, and it's like, the kind of work I'm doing over the last few years, it's like, nope, you got to break those walls. I mean, for me, it's like it's time to break those walls down, because it's keeping me, it's not that I didn't have friends, it's not that I don't have people who care about me, but it was just like to a point where I'm like, you know what, you become very isolated sometimes, okay? Depending on how on how they're done. We all need to have a certain amount of boundaries and safeties and protections, no doubt. But we can do that to the point that we stay away from everybody all the time, and and it can be other things. It doesn't necessarily even have to mean that I don't like people and I don't want to see them. It could just be, oh well, I'm so busy, I just have to stay here and I can't deal with anybody else. A lot of times, it may be literally true that somebody has some work that they're doing that they're very, very busy with, but when you never connect with anybody, or you avoid connecting on that basis, sometimes that's a sign that you are emotionally wounded, and this is just a routine. Actually, what the Osho Zen deck calls it is the safe but unnatural routine that we get into. That it feels safe, but it's not really getting to the thing. However, dealing with the wound, it's like dealing with the thorn, is sometimes feels more painful, but getting the thorn out would actually be the better thing to do. So thinking differently is going to, first of all, involve so part of it's like, what's the worst thing that could happen, in addition to 180-degree thinking. And also sometimes when we're kind of like undecided, you just gotta do it. Sometimes that's the thing. Like we kind of waffle around indecision a lot of the time. We're like, I don't know. Well, should I? Shouldn't I? Yeah, it's like you're at the edge of the water. You stick your foot in. You take it out. You stick your foot in. You take it. I don't know. Is it too cold? Is it this? Is it that? Just get in. Sometimes the answer is just get in, and just see what happens. The worst that can happen. I don't know. Maybe you want to jump out again, but there's. Sometimes you just have to kind of put yourself in the situation and move forward. That's like the thing we have when we're unmotivated. You have a day where you wake up and you're like, I have stuff to do. I don't feel like doing it. Sometimes the answer is just get up and look at the list and just start doing thing one. And then eventually, I find that happens to me. I'll have mornings where I wake up and I'm very undecided about how I want to go about my day. And then I'm like, all right, I'm just going to pick one thing and start with it. And then when I do that, then everything else just kind of rolls with it, and maybe I finish everything, maybe I don't, but you kind of, sometimes we just kind of have this, it's actually like that 9 of Cups in the Osho Zen deck. We're looking at the 9s here, and that was that's, they could call it the laziness card, but really what it is just this kind of like, I got to get myself moving before everything behind me starts to like collapse. Like I've just kind of got to get moving on something, because sometimes it's not so much that we don't want to do something or don't like doing it. It's just that we, for whatever reason, we're just in a space where we don't feel like doing it. And again, we all have days like that where, you may have a day where it's just like, screw it. There's no reason to do anything. But look, and it's on the bottom of the deck too, Ace of Swords. But thinking differently, I also think of chaos magic and the way in which they tell you that is one of the things they tell you is like don't do things the same way. So for instance, they would say if you're driving to work, like take a different route to work every day. Don't eat the same things every day. Don't do just have variety be the norm. That's another way. Always be having those new experiences, because it's a matter of expansion and contraction. And even if we hit obstacles in certain places, I mean, there's other directions we can move. Really, the number of directions we can move is probably infinite. We have lots of options. We have quantum options here. I mean, there's a lot of options as to what you can do. So if you're in a mode where you're saying, yeah, I would love to make a change, but, so you have to go look at the but and say, well, okay, is your conclusion about this necessarily the right one? Okay, and thinking about it differently means that's why a lot of times I want to identify what's the thing, what's the script that you keep telling yourself. And again, that doesn't mean people are just gonna move beyond it, overnight. But you need to kind of see what it is and then say, okay, even if I'm not ready to give up that script, how can I think about this differently? And talking to other people, that's why you don't want to isolate yourself, because sometimes we can get into sort of a bubble, or maybe even an echo chamber, which is why sometimes it's good to get points of view of people who maybe don't agree with you or see it differently, so that we can think about, we don't necessarily have to accept other points of view, but as our own, but we can at least, they might give us something else to think about. So there's a lot of ways to do that, and it's, what's our first card? New vision, right? Seeing everything in its heights and its depth. This is actually the Hanged Man energy. And so interesting that comes up as the first one. Now, the inner feeling of which we are unaware here is the ordinariness card, okay? So ordinariness, okay, I would say with respect to this has to do with the way in which we just want to be ordinary. In a lot of ways, we always think we want drama or something, well, maybe drama is not the right word. A lot of people hate the word drama. But we don't, we like to have something that makes life interesting, right? But I would say most of the time on a day-to-day basis, we just want to be ordinary. It's just like, I just want to get up and do my thing, and I don't want anything dramatic to happen. I just want to go through, do my work, go home, watch my regular TV shows or whatever, whatever the routine is for a person, right? Or whatever they're into. And so sometimes when we have this ordinariness, I mean, yes, we actually, just to look at that differently, sometimes what this might be saying also is sometimes that we don't need to be extraordinary. We can just be think about how it might be okay to be ordinary. That you may be, because I think a lot of times we may have a restlessness that comes from wanting to do something extraordinary and then feeling despair because we can't do it right away. So I don't know, that has to be part of the perspective. You know, what do we have in terms of being ordinary, or what's going to become ordinary for you? But this is Eight of Pentacles energy, so this is busy energy. This is busy. But ordinariness too, to me, is also like, yeah, we just need to be ordinary. You don't know, okay, you don't necessarily also have to be doing anything extraordinary to do what you want or to have something different. And yeah, the external feeling is postponement. I think when we look at this straight across, it's just this idea of because we like our routine, because we like things to be ordinary, we often postpone taking certain actions because we're like, well, because we're in a zone where we're like, well, there's no extremes, right? We're in the zone and we're like, okay, or it's familiar. Back to what Joanne was saying, it's familiar. And the unknown, we have a huge fear of the unknown. I've often said my definition of religion is, this is our means of it's a means of negotiating what's unknown. The unknown is something, we like predictability. That's why we love science so much. We want somebody to be able to tell us, oh, well, here's the cause and here's the effect and here's what's repeatable, and so this is what the facts are. And yeah, we want to be grounded in facts, certainly. In fact, we have beyond illusion here. This is the Judgment card. So, so there needs to be sort of an awakening to the fact. And then when changes come in, we've been talking about like that Mars-Uranus algol. We've been talking about all this different stuff that's been happening, and the eclipses and all the stuff that's gone on this year that have shaken people up, that have shaken their life up and made them, or people may just get to a point where they are continuing to do the same thing over and over again, and then get to a point where there's like I said, it's like a breaking point where it's like, okay, there's something I want to be different, but I don't know how to break out of the cycle. So this is basically saying, this is Judgment, okay? So this is a card of awakening. It's also a card of repetition. Judgment can be a card of when something comes around again and comes in front of you. It's like, okay, now look at it with open eyes. Don't fall just into the pattern of, well, this is just ordinary, routine, familiar, so I can postpone taking any action. We need that new vision. And ultimately, we have the Ten of Pentacles, this We Are the World card, okay? So that's literally what I'm just saying. We Are the World it's the Ten of Pentacles, which we tend to think of as being financial security, family, community, like all those kind of things. But it's also about legacy. It's about what you are giving back to the world. And we see that the world is part of this. It's saying you're part of the world. Don't just stay in this little bubble or this little corner. Even if it's just you make a decision, even if you say like, okay, I'm not changing anything about my life, but I'm going to learn something new. We are our own medicine. Yeah, exactly. And to that point, yes, that nobody can really be the medicine but you. Nobody else is going to do it but you. Like, you have to do it for yourself, ultimately. People can show you the way. I mean, like I said, you can have friends, family, counselors, therapists, people like me who are coaches. I can tell you all kinds of stuff. But ultimately, you are the one who decides what your reality is or what works for you. And again, as I've said, words are not enough. It has to be in the body. It has to come from your experience. But this is definitely a time, this is strong like Jupiter type energy as far as I'm concerned, even though this is an earth card. It's kind of like you're expanding your horizons, because when we contract, when we pull back, that's when we say, I don't want to be out there. I'm afraid. I'm afraid of other people. I'm afraid of what's new or what's different. And that goes back to the reality tunnel ideal. If you're too stuck in your reality tunnel, then you're not, when new information comes in, you don't embrace it. You're afraid of it. And therefore, that, by the way, that's what I connect in my book with the fear of death, because death is change. Okay? It does, like I said, it doesn't have to be physical death. It can have to do with just big changes, and or just like we don't deal well with loss. And again, astrologically, certain signs deal even less well with loss, especially if you've got a lot of earth, because you're fixed, or you're part of a fixed sign. And some people do a better job of dealing with it. But honestly, it's that we're kind of being, with all the changes that are going on and the way that society is changing, that's part of the problem we're having right now. The reason people are becoming so tribal is because things have been changing very, very fast, and we're resisting that. Everybody's just kind of like, no, I want to go back to where it was. Dealing with all these RN. Yeah, I'm not sure what the RM is, but yeah, well, certainly dealing with all of this noise, with all of this change and the stuff that's going on. So yeah, I mean, again, but I've talked a lot about having to kind of like, oh, right now. Sorry. Okay. Thank you. I didn't know that. Dealing with all this stuff right now. So yeah. So you kind of feel like we're in the middle of all this stuff. There's a lot of chaos going on, and that also might be part of the impulse to why we're like, we just want to be ordinary. I just want to have a normal day. I don't want to wake up in the morning and have all this stuff going on that could completely alter my life. Like, maybe I'm okay. Maybe I just want my little corner where I can be peaceful and so forth. And that's fair enough, absolutely. But in order to have that peace, you have to be able to flow with change. That's the thing. And a lot of times we just do it by trying to keep things as they are. But if something is getting to a point where, like I said, even if it's been something good for you, that it's become restrictive, then then it's something that's reaching a point where it's no longer helpful to you. And interesting. Oh, okay. Our rune for today is Fehu. I pulled a Norse rune, and Fehu. This is a great rune actually, because this is a rune of prosperity. This is a rune of having abundance, having enough. Having a great harvest, having things be open to you. And the fact that this rune comes up suggests to me, okay, speaking of thinking about things differently, if we go back to the postponement card here, we see that there's somebody who's looking at this gray landscape, right? So this is what we tend to see. What that's saying is that this is what's here, okay? That, we're looking at everything in terms of what we lack, and it's like, actually that would be the way to flip your vision. We talk about it like as a gratitude practice, but let's just look at everything that we've got. What do you have going for you? What are your resources? Or what are the things that you have that you're not making use of? It's funny when people say to me like, oh, you do a lot of different stuff, Brigid, and I'm like, yeah, well, because I had the expertise in the one thing that I did for years. But when that got to a point where that was changing, and I'm like, okay, I'm not interested in the new way that they're doing this. I mean, I understand why there is going to be a new way, but it's just not something that interests me anymore. So what else do I know? What else have I learned over these years? Oh, I've learned cards over these years. I have this background in myth and religion and all this stuff, psychoanalysis. I have, I have this healing training. I have this, I have that. How do we make all that work together? How do we take all that together so that I can go out every day and do the thing that I like to do, and try to make it work? I mean, it's very unconventional, and again, for an earth sign, I'm just like every day, I'm like, is this really going to work? But, sometimes you just got to get into it. And so you might want to think about that yourself. There may be certain things that you do and people say, well, yeah, I've done that for a long time, but I can't make a living at that. I can't do anything with it. It's like, well, you don't necessarily have to make a living, but maybe there's something you can make use of with that. Maybe there's a way you can share that gift with other people. Okay. So I think there's a case of examining what we have, and wherever we catastrophize and say, yeah, well, if I go down this road, terrible things will happen. You have to ask yourself whether terrible things are really going to happen, and how do you know that? I mean, if you had a past experience where something bad happened, then that could be like, you might be saying like, oh no, I don't want a repeat of that. But, I don't know. Maybe if there's certain circumstances that were not right then, maybe they're right now. So anyway, I don't know. I'm just talking a bit about the summary here is just kind of like thinking about how you think outside the box, how you think differently, and it may literally require a certain amount of thought experiments, or certainly honoring your inner voice, and thirdly, just kind of sometimes just getting in the middle and just doing something different, just to see what it's like. Because oftentimes it's more the fear of the unknown that's stopping us, rather than the idea that what's in that unknown is going to be something going to be terrible, and we're going to regret it and make a mistake. We tend to look at the unknown that way. We'd rather stick with something. It's like, okay, even if this is imperfect and that kind of sucks, at least I know what to do. We don't like being in a position of not knowing what to do or looking like we don't know what we're doing. So sometimes it's just a case of, obviously we have boundaries with regard to that as well, but how far do you want to push into new territory? And so it's just kind of like, okay, well, maybe you need to, okay, no, you don't, so I don't know about this thing, so let's find out about it, There's definitely an encouragement here to expand your horizons, to be able to invite that new way of thinking. Because that kind of experience is what invites the aha moments. That's what invites those moments that allows you to say, wait a minute, this is what I could do. And of course, having conversations with other people who can definitely give you a different perspective. So anyway, that's it for today. Speaking of different perspectives, like I said, I'm doing the dream analysis workshop in beginning of August. I've got the Rouhani sessions going on in New Jersey. I've got this, not this weekend, but next weekend, I'm going to be doing a free session in Milford. So if people want to join that, find out more about it. And I'm also offering sessions in Milford and online. My calendar is booking up this week, so I've got quite a few appointments already between now and Saturday. So if you want to get an appointment in, definitely go to transitionlifecoaching.net /book-online, and you can see what availability I have for whatever services you want. Because like I said, I do Rouhani, I do Reiki. This was deep for today. Thank you. Oh, you're welcome. Like I said, it's just whatever comes up today is what I talk about. But yeah, so I have all of that, and also my workshops and stuff will be up there as well on my website. So gonna definitely rewatch. Okay, well, good. I might actually have to rewatch it myself to remind myself of what I've just said about everything. But yeah, so so anyway, everybody have a great Wednesday. I guess it's hump day, it's Wednesday. Great rest of the week, and I, of course, will be here tomorrow morning. Take care. Have a great day.